Why are you recording?
You don't want to record?
No, we're not ready to start. Thank you all for coming today for the South Sound Story Guild May meeting or concert. And those of you who are on Zoom, welcome. And because we love to see your faces, it'd be wonderful if you keep your cameras on, if possible. We'd really appreciate that. Well, this May is a real special month because it is Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander Month. And we're really fortunate to have 3 tellers from the Asian American Storytellers in Action group to come share some stories with all of us today. After the tellers, the featured tellers, there'll be a 10-minute break. And then after the break, when everyone comes in, then we start our story share. And I do have a list of people, folks, who have graciously volunteered to tell a story. And we ask that the stories be about 8 minutes long so that we can give everybody a chance to tell. If you want to do some sharing at break time, just let me know. Or if you're on Zoom, you can raise your hand and we'll get you on the list, okay? Well, today's concert is based around Mother's Day special. So it is stories about and from our mothers and grandmothers. Now, I remember some sayings that my mother would spout off, but I'd also hear what other mothers or grandmas would say, and some of it's like, start acting your age, not your shoe size. When you have kids, you'll understand. Oh, I use that one. This one I use a lot. Because I said so.
Oh, yeah.
Right, Nancy? But the one I really enjoy saying is, I'll always love you. Now, Rupa's mom would say, life is sweet like a juicy mango. Enjoy it to the fullest. Now, can't you just see all that yellow juice flowing down your chin? Ooh, mangoes. Now, Rupa Mohan, she is a teller from Walnut Creek, California. And she grew up in South India, where that area is just rich in culture and in sacred stories. The food is absolutely fantastic also. If you ever get a chance, you got to have a dosa with sambar. Excellent. Rupa is a storytelling docent at the famous Asian Art Museum in San Francisco. And she tells multi-genre stories that tangle, that braid folk tales with her childhood adventures. Rupa is also on the board of the Storytelling Association of California, and is also a member of the Asian American Storytellers in Action. What I'm really proud of Rupa, I must brag about her, is that she is a Chautauqua scholar, and she has spent months and months with this program doing research on a particular biographical character. In this case, it is Kasturba Gandhi, the wife of Mahatma Gandhi. And she does an absolutely fantastic performance. Recently, Rupa was a feature teller at the Women's Storytelling Festival in Virginia. So now, please welcome Rupa.
Namaste and greetings to everyone, both online and in person. I know you have gathered there, and I wish I could be there with you. But today I want to take you back, first of all, to 2 months ago when I was visiting India, and my sister and I decided to travel south from Chennai and go and rediscover the area that my grandmother, our grandmother, had grown up in. So we went to this city of Tanjore, or Tanjavur, as we would say in our native language, Tamil. And we looked at the beautiful temples there, and we had heard from a cousin that the house that my grandmother was raised in still stands there. So we somehow got hold of that address and we went looking for this house. And to our delight, yes, it was standing there in a residential neighborhood in Tanjore behind the Cosmopolitan Club. This house was probably built in the early 1900s. It's very rare to find these homes in India anymore. Everybody is converting them to multi-level buildings, or so to see this home standing there was absolutely stunning. And not only that, it had passed to different hands over the last few decades, and it was now a women's hostel for nurses. And we were actually granted entry because we were women. And we got to go inside and look at all the rooms, especially the room in front where our father had actually been born. And it was so nostalgic and wonderful because we had only heard stories about this house. And I was thinking, if the walls could talk, it would tell us all the secrets of our grandma. But here is what we have heard over the years. My grandma was named Hemambujam, which means golden lotus. Very auspicious name in India, especially South India. And of course, her family started calling her Hema. She was a very special child, the only daughter among 6 brothers. And her father was a very successful lawyer. And often the British officers and the elite came to his house to consult with him and also to party with him because he was supposed to be very brainy. And remember, this was a time when we were under the British Raj. My grandmother was born in 1911. And we heard that she would run around playing with her brothers, climbing the mango trees at the back of the house, learning to play tennis and badminton, and also went to school by coach with her brothers to the next town. Now, all this came to a standstill when she hit puberty, because she was from a traditional South Indian family where girls were not allowed to go out and do things. It was a miracle that she had even learned this much. Well, then they got her a tutor, a lady called Ethel, who taught her a little bit of English because the schools outside were Tamil medium. Well, when she turned 13, it was time for her to get married. Yes, many of her friends were already married, and they found her the perfect suitor or groom from another rather elite family based in Madras, now known as Chennai. And as it was customary, she never met him until the wedding day. Yes, the families had made this match. And it was a match between 2 well-suited families who valued education. My grandfather, to-be grandfather at that point, was a scholar with an advanced degree in botany, the only son. And they heard from other relatives that this family was well reputed. I can imagine how my grandmother would have been on her wedding day, draped in 9 yards of silk and adorned with jewelry, rubies and diamonds that were passed down. And then finally, in her own house with its large yard, the groom, my grandfather, arrived in an Impala open car which was decorated with flowers. And soon the young couple were made to sit in front of the sacred fire with priests officiating this wedding. After a lot of chanting and repetition, my grandmother sat on her father's lap as it was customary, and my grandfather put the special chain around her neck, which was a wedding chain, and they were man and wife. Soon my grandmother, Hema, was leaving behind her wonderful childhood and going to a new home, that of her in-laws. Oh, she traveled by train the next day, a steam engine that went chuk, 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 chuk. And she looked out of the window and saw the beautiful coconut palm trees, the rice fields, and the holy river, the Kaveri river, which was the Ganges of the south. And she controlled her tears and tried to be brave, because her mother had told her that she had to be strong and adjust to this new life. When she reached Madras, by the end of the day, she was taken by a hand-drawn rickshaw to her new home. In a very busy city, Madras, with lot of hustle, bustle, traffic, very different from her native Tanjore. And she was entering a joint family where many relatives lived under one roof. Of course, she was welcomed by the women of the house, but soon she had to go to the large kitchen and start helping cook the meals to feed all these 20 or so hungry mouths that lived under this roof. The name of the house was Tupil House. It was in a little oasis in the middle of a very, very busy street. Now, Hema didn't know any cooking. She had led a rather pampered life, and her mother-in-law was very strict. She used to control her and try to teach her how to grate the coconut using the knife that was bent like this, how to pound the pulses and the grains, how to grind the chutneys, and then make the doughs or the batter for things like the dosas that Toby mentioned. It was an orthodox family, so they didn't outsource any of this. The women of the house had to make it all from scratch. And when Hema faltered, her mother-in-law would get hold of her ear, and it hurt her. And she would say, "Hema, did your mother not teach you any of this?" And then she also went on to say, "Hema, you have married my only son, and he is a very brilliant young man. You have to keep him happy. And you also have to give us an heir very soon." Hema would cry herself to sleep. My grandpa, known as TSR, was indeed very brilliant. He was reading Shakespeare and quoting from it, besides his botany studies. And he didn't pay too much attention to her in the beginning, but slowly she caught his attention, and maybe she even dared complain about his mother. And thankfully, they waited a few years. And when she was 18, she had her first child. And can you guess the sex of the child? It was a son. And immediately, Hema's status got elevated. She went up the ladder, and even her mother-in-law stopped harassing her. And the best thing about this was she could go back to her mother's home for an entire 6 months and be pampered. This was the norm then. When she came back with this beautiful baby boy, everybody pitched in and they all helped her raise her first son. Very soon she had another daughter and 3 more sons, including my father. So by the time she was 27, she had a brood of 5 children and realized that she loved being a mother. My grandpa, meanwhile, was doing very well and wanted to make use of a scholarship to go to England to study. Yes, the British encouraged such scholars by giving them financial aid. And soon he was ready to cross the waters and go to faraway England. And there was some superstition around crossing dark waters in conservative families like ours. But Hema, his progressive young wife, encouraged him to go and that she would take care of the kids with the help of all the ladies in the house. And he departed in the early 1930s. Yes, and Hema was there with her children. But there was something else happening around that time. The freedom struggle in India was gaining momentum. And there were these people all over who were listening to leaders like Mahatma Gandhi and joining the movement. And they had decided it was time to send the British back and to gain independence. Hema, in her own way, also wanted to join this movement and do whatever she could. Well, she got an opportunity to attend a meeting where Mahatma Gandhi came to Madras and thousands of people gathered on Marina Beach. And there she went with a few of the relatives from the house. And she heard him address everyone, asking even the women to join the movement. Well, Hema was inspired. She saw many women give up their jewels as donations. And perhaps she did give up a piece or two. But she was inspired by the words that be the change that you want to see in the world. That was echoing all around. And people were singing Vande Mataram, which means I bow to you, Mother India. And of course, there were reports that people were being arrested, the freedom fighters were being beaten and even shot at. But they persisted because the entire country was coming together. Hema went back home and decided that she was going to try and make a difference by raising her kids to be nationalists and good citizens, by not being scared about anything, And that time when my grandpa came back from his studies, he was surprised to see Hema much more self-confident and empowered. And she didn't stand in his way when he wanted to take different assignments in India and even overseas in order to do research and continue his work after getting his PhD. Well, they crossed the ocean and went to Sri Lanka, and she even got a chance to go to Japan. Yes, my grandpa was invited to present at a symposium. In those days, nobody took their wives to such things. But Hema put down her foot and said, I will come. Make sure you can get me a visa. And it happened. She sailed across the wide ocean and she went to Japan. Wearing her 9-yard sari, her diamond nose ring and earrings, and slippers on her feet. Being a strict vegetarian must have been challenging, and I asked her once how she managed that. She told me that she loved eating all the fruits and vegetables that she would get, and of course, drinking all the milk. Well, when she went to Japan, she was inspired by the elders there who are leading such active and productive lives. So she came back with a renewed energy and optimism. And she continued being very cheerful, positive, having a zest for life that was quite infectious. My grandpa got very ill and she nursed him through that, and he passed away in his 70s. But Hema lived to the ripe old age of 95, and she was incredibly positive, inspiring, and she lived up to her reputation of being a golden lotus. And I would like to quickly show you a couple of pictures. So this is the old home that still stands there. It's called Lakshmi Vilas, named after a goddess. And in this front room is where my dad and all his siblings were born. And here is my grandmother, little later in life. She had put on some weight but didn't care about it. Here she is, draped in her 9-yard sari and posing, I think, in some kind of a studio. And she continued just wearing her 9 yards and wearing her bindi, which is the sign of a married woman. And she lived a long and happy life. Thank you so much.
Oh, Rupa, that was fantastic. I mean, to trace where your grandma lived and finding the house, and you gained entrance permission to be able to go visit it. And also, what struck me was here, she learned not to be scared, to continue on. And gosh, what an adventurous grandma to go to Japan. That is so neat, Rupa. Thank you very much. Now, our next teller, Eleanor. This is what her mom says. If you got it, flaunt it. If you got more of it, decorate it. It is so great. Eleanor is from California, Oakland, and she delights her audience with stories from around the world. And she is also a docent, a storytelling docent at the famous Asian Art Museum in San Francisco. She's a teaching artist in Oakland and Oakland Public Schools, and enjoys telling personal stories from her Black and Filipino cultures, which are so rich. Now, Eleanor has taught at the National Storytelling Network and also in Bay Area venues. She's a member of the Asian American Storytellers in Action and is a major contributor to the Asian American Storytopia program on YouTube, which caters wonderful stories and activities for kids who are kindergarten to grade 5, but also to adults. So we hope you'll check out that site. There are 23 episodes. Eleanor is a fabulous teller. Her stories are so rich. So please welcome Eleanor.
Thank you so much. Rupa, that was wonderful. I'm going to tell you a story today about my mother. You know, as we age, we people of a certain age, we begin to ask ourselves questions like, what's going to happen after I die? Will I be able to control how my children distribute my things? Can I orchestrate how they're going to behave, how they're going to treat each other? Well, my mother, Gloria Santiago Clement, to all those questions answered, well, yes, of course I can. And you can remove the picture now. Now, Mom was a petite Filipino woman. She had honey-colored skin, and all her life she had long black hair that was down to her waist, which she wore up in a signature bun. She was a Technicolor fashionista. She could wear the hell out of a pair of red leather pants with a matching jacket, maybe for her bridge club, or a beautiful chiffon, royal blue chiffon dress with embroidered silver and pearls, maybe for a gala where she would dance and her skirts would twirl for the Filipino Americans in Marin County. This dress was very special. She wowed everybody at the Officers Club when she was in a fashion show. This gorgeous designer gown that was white with crystal sequins all over the bodice. She also loved color when she was wearing her traditional Filipino folk styles when she was part of a Filipino dance troupe. Now, my mother and father met when my dad was assigned to the Philippines just after World War II. He was a Black Army officer. He was 25 and she was 17 when they first met. They fell in love and got married against all odds. And then she left the Philippines and her family and traveled with my dad all around the world as a military family. There were 4 kids. I'm the oldest, 2 boys and 2 girls. And we all, after we had kids, my mother was called Lola. Lola means grandmother in Tagalog, which is the language of the Philippines. Now, my mom reigned supreme at our family gatherings. She delighted in her 4 children, in her 6 grandchildren, and her 3 great-grandchildren. And what she loved to do more than anything else was to feed her brood. She was a great cook. And we would have, because of my dad and our African-American heritage, my mom would make collard and kale and mustard greens cooked in ham hocks, smoked ham hocks, buttery cornbread, and barbecue ribs or chicken. And then we would have Filipino soul food too. We would have pancit, which is a vermicelli rice noodle with bits of cabbage and onion and carrot and shrimp and pork. We would have lumpia, which are like egg rolls, but they're tightly rolled meat and vegetables in a little fried egg roll type shell. And then we would also have adobo. Adobo is like, bits of chicken or tender morsels of pork, all stewed in a soy base. Oh, I can smell and taste all those goodies now. You know, at our family gatherings, my mom taught us the tinikling. The tinikling is the national dance of the Philippines. So she would bring out these long 10-foot poles of bamboo poles, and we would rhythmically tap them. Dun, da, 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 da. Da, 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 dun, 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 da, 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 da. And we would jump in and out doing various dance moves in and out of these clapping bamboo poles. You didn't want to really dance if both of my brothers had the bamboo poles because they would clap really hard. Well, besides that, we just told a steady stream of jokes. There was a lot of relentless teasing and trash talking during games. You know, I remember one Mother's Day in particular. All of us were going to my mom's house. That was our gathering place. And as we entered with our families, my mom started passing out Post-its to her 4 kids, lime green and neon pink and blue and red and yellow. And we each had pens. We were looking at her and she said, well, this is for a game we're going to play. Well, we loved games. So we gathered into the living room and everybody sat expectantly. And my mother came to the front and said, now you all know that I do not want you to fight after I die. Oh, Mom, we all groaned in unison. Just then, she said, no, you're going to write your name on one of the Post-its. And so my brother, just not so very surreptitiously, threw the Post-it at my other brother. And that just started an instant Post-it throwing war. And everyone started throwing Post-its. My mother was so mad. She took her slipper off her foot and she popped my brother on the arm and she said, you're bastos, you're bad. And then my sister, who had her fingers in her ears yelling, la, 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 la. She hit her too and said, you're bastos too. Now settle down, settle down. And she went around and started picking up the Post-its and she was muttering to herself, Jesus Maria Josep, Jesus Maria Josep. And I leaned over to my sister and I said, oh, we're in trouble now. She's calling out the big guns, Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. She said, serious, I'm serious now. Your father and his sister and Flo were very, very close when they were growing up like all of you. And then when Granny and Pop-Pop died, they went back to Philadelphia to sell the little row house and do the business. And they had words. And they both said things that they cannot walk back from. And do you know? They never spoke one word again after that or got the families together. Now, for my mother, that was horrific. Her greatest fear in life was not having a close family. And she was resolved that was never going to happen to her children. So she said, now, and she put a Post-it and a pen in each of her kids' hands. And she said, I want you to put your name on a Post-it and you put it on anything you want in this house. And if there are more than one name on something, I will put the names in a basket, pick one, and that will settle it. You won't have to fight after I'm gone. Now, we knew that, and then she said, and you know what is promised to each of you. Don't put a Post-it on that. Now, for me, what was promised was this beautiful black lacquer bar with gold and ivory inlaid scenes. It was absolutely gorgeous with intricate folding cabinets. And that was going to be mine. When my parents were in the Philippines, when they were assigned in Bangkok, Thailand, they went on a vacation to Hong Kong, and this was one of her purchases. The irony is that she doesn't drink at all, and I rarely drink, but we both love this bar. which is in my living room right now. So she said, also, and we knew other people, what other people were getting. When people said, well, what about your jewelry, Mom? She said, oh, jewelry goes to my girls. It's promised to my girls. So we knew that. Well, we looked at each other and she said, do you have your pens? Do you have your papers? We looked at each other incredulously. We said, oh, are we really doing this? Really can't be happening. And then we're looking at each other and she just said, ready, set, go. And at that, everybody just jumped up and ran to all corners of the house. We were writing our names and putting things on, all to the cheers of all of our family members. My son yelled out, Mom, put a post-it on that Ming tree. My mom designed and made jeweled miniature trees that were beautiful. He said, I like that one. And then my daughter said, Mom, put a post-it on that chair. You like that chair. Even my husband said, Eleanor, your brother just put a post-it on that picture that you like. So of course I put my name and I put my post-it right over his, so you couldn't see his name. Well, we ran all over the house, putting post-its on things that we wanted. When we'd get tired, we'd sit down on the couch and she would come over and say, is that all you want? And at that, we would jump up again and start going through the house again, just to be sure we didn't miss anything. Well, we did that for a while. And then she started saying to everyone, okay, come back. It's time to eat. We feasted. And then after we feasted, we came back to the living room and we looked around. And it looked like it had been snowing multicolored Post-its all over the house. My mom had a clipboard for each of us, and we walked around and wrote down who had a Post-it on what, and anything that had been 2 or 3 names on something, she did pick the one. She said, no, you don't fight. This one is going to Eleanor. And we wrote that down. Now, that was her way of saying, now you don't have to fight. Even when she acquired something new afterwards, one of us would say, is there a Post-it on that? Or maybe you would come into her house and someone would have written a Post-it and put it on something that was broken or ugly that had been brought into the house. Well, we had many more wonderful family gatherings before she passed away at 84. And when she passed away, the 4 of us got together and sat in her living room, and we made up 3 rules for first dibs of the distribution of the house. The first rule was, if you bought it for her, you could have it if you wanted. The second was, if it was promised to you, of course, you got to keep it. The third rule was, if it had a Post-it on it with your name, you got to keep it. Now, we also then looked around. She had had many more things since then. And we just talked in each room and we said, Mom didn't have anything on that redwood coffee table. Does anybody want that? It was very respectful and casual. And we didn't care how much money it was. We had decided we didn't care to make sure all the value of everything, made sure everyone had an equal monetary value. What was coming to us was very special already. Well, after we finished, we also gave Post-its to our kids. And for anything else that didn't have a Post-it on it, the kids chose things that they wanted. And then we made piles of things that were going to the consignment place, things going to the dump, things going to Goodwill and Salvation Army. With the money from consignment, we put it all in a kitty, and the 4 of us, the 4 brothers and sisters, had all Sibs brunches once a quarter with that special kitty. And so we would reminisce and share stories and laugh every quarter, and I know that's exactly how she would have wanted us to behave. You did it, Mom. Yes, of course I did. You're going to behave the way I told you to. Thank you. And that's the end. Those were my brothers and sisters.
Oh, What a wonderful story, Eleanor. That was really so touching. And what a mom. And now I understand. I mean, she's so fashionable. I really get the saying, if you got it, flaunt it. Because she is absolutely beautiful. And not only that, how wise she was. And you know what? My mom too, we didn't have sticky notes, but we had those little cell tags with all the different colors. And so my brothers and my sisters and I, we each got a different color, and we were to put those on something that we wanted in that house. So Eleanor, thank you very much for that fantastic story. Now my mom, her favorite saying was, sweetness of honey gets you more than the sour of vinegar. Be considerate, be kind. That was so much my mom. It was very, very hard to live up to that, believe me. It's really difficult. My grandma was a very important part of our family. And mom would say, okay, everyone, get in the car. We're gonna go to grandma. And we would go to my grandmother's house, Takeko Miyagawa, who lived in Seattle. And when we would arrive, she would have this big plate of sushi. And when our tummies were full, we'd sit down on the floor, and there she would be in her comfy chair. And she would say, you all probably want to hear a story, eh? Oh, yes, Grandma, yes. Let me see. And it was at that time that her beautiful white cat would just rub itself on her legs, and then whoop, and there she is patting Yuki the cat. I know what I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you the boy who drew cats. Mukashi, Mukashi, long ago in Japan, there was a farmer who had many, many children. They were all busy out in the field helping the father. Now, the youngest son, Saburo, he stayed at home. Now, Saburo was a kind of child who he had a hard time paying attention. He was running here, running there. In fact, in Japanese, they called him Takochi kid, here and there, running around. So on this particular day, Saburo's mother said, Saburo, I want you to go out in the field and tell your brothers and sisters it's time for lunch. Hi, Okasa, yes, mother. And off he goes. And as he's walking along the dirt path, right in front of him dashes a cat chasing a mouse. And he just stops. And he gets down, crouches down, gets a stick, and he starts to draw ears, nose, whiskers, cats, fat cats, thin cats, small cats, big cats, 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 cats. He's busy drawing these cats when his mom notices outside of the window, there he is. He hasn't left that spot. Saburo! Hi, cousin, I'm so sorry. And off he went to tell his brothers and sisters it was time for lunch. Now that night, Saburo had a talking from his dad. Saburo, I don't think you're meant to be a farmer. I've already talked to the monk on top of the hill at the temple. You will be a scholar. We are going tomorrow morning up to the temple. So his mom made him some rice balls, put it in a little knapsack, and off they went up to the hill. Bam, bam, bam. Huge, heavy door. And it was opened up, and there was this monk. Yes, I know, Saburo. I have been expecting you. Say goodbye to your father, which he did. He was quite sad, but off he went into this great big hall, and it was filled with students sitting down. And the monk teacher, today you will all learn to read and write. First, the writing. And he pulled out a dish, and he started to take his earth stick and rub it in with water until there was a thick paste of ink, and he dipped the horse hair paintbrush into it. And on the paper, he started to write each one. Each. All of you, get out your brushes and your ink. I want you to draw 500. And off he went. Also, Salvador was busy doing this, and he put his brush in and he started to draw each, one, but soon the brush took a life of its own. Ears, nose, whiskers, cats. Well, the teacher came in. Ah, Carol, that is very good. Salvador, cats. Well, it is the first day of school. Now, the next day, the teacher, today you are going to learn how to do two. Each knee. Each knee. So the students are busy, and the teacher's looking. 500, and off he leaves. So Salvador, of course, again, his paintbrush takes a life of its own, and he starts to draw these cats. Now, his paper is full of cats, and he looks around. He sees a blank wall. So he goes over and he starts to draw cats on the blank wall. When the monk comes back and he goes, Salvador, you are not meant to be a scholar. Tomorrow I am going to take you back to your family. Well, Salvador was really distraught because, his family would lose face. Oh, no. That couldn't happen. So he decided to leave the temple late at night and go to the next town. And he did. Had his knapsack, he had a flask for the water, his dish, his paintbrushes, and off he went to the next town. And it was really dark. Then he saw up on the hill, of course, a temple. So I know I can spend the night there. Of course, they won't refuse me. And then when he reached the temple, a big wooden door, it's very dark. Bam, bam, bam. Hello? Hello? Oh, there's a lamp. So he took flame, lit the lamp. He walked inside that temple. Oh, there's nobody here. Oh, my goodness, there's a grand hall. Look at all the walls. Wow, what is that in the corner over there, though? It looks like long white sticks, maybe even bones. And he put the lamp down and he got his painting equipment. And he had a big pool of black ink, and he put his paintbrush in and he started to draw cats on the wall. Oh, I'm so tired. Oh, there's one more wall left. Well, I can't leave it there. So he started to draw this big cat, ears, nose, whiskers, but this cat was laying down like it was taking a cat nap. Like this. Okay, I'm done now. I'm ready to go to sleep. But my mom always said not to sleep in an open area. Oh, there's a closet. So he opened the closet door, went in, and he curled himself up, and he started to go to sleep. Oh, but before, of course, he put the lamp up, no fires and stuff. Well, suddenly, he woke up with a start because he heard this sound. What is that scratching? And he saw at the edge of the door, there was a space. He saw long claws trying to get in, and then a black nose that was sticking right through, and attached to the black nose with these huge, like rope-like things. Well, they were whiskers and trying to get through. Oh, he was so frightened. And suddenly, there was some fight that was going on. Stop. He said to himself, I'm not going to go in and see what's out there. He waited till morning when the sunlight came through that slat. Hey? There in front of him was this giganticus rat, as big as a cow, dead. And he looked up, who could have killed him? Wait a minute. That painting I did of the cat. I know the cat was laying down, but now the cat is sitting up like this. What is it? And what is that red on its mouth? And he went closer to look, and the mouth of the cat had drippings of blood. Well, word went out to the village that this monster cat that had been, the monster rat that had been terrorizing this village for 7 years was dead. Great rejoicing. Then Saburo knew, I am not to be a farmer or a scholar. I am to be an artist. Now, if you will go to that village and go to a ramen noodle shop today, you would see a painting of a cat beckoning customers to come in to the store. And that is the story of the boy who drew cats, which my grandma finished telling. And as she did, that cat at first dropped off her lap, started to go into the kitchen, turned around and looked at us and did this. So it was time for us to go home. We hopped back into the car and we said, Mata Oba-chan, see you later. And my grandmother, Takeko Miyagawa, then she closed the door and gave a sigh. She was Issei, first generation Japanese American, and the grandchildren, Sansei, third generation. She had so much she wanted to share with the grandchildren, her experiences, why she came to America. Oh, she remembered why she came to America. You see, she had fallen in love with a handsome man, Shigetoshi Horiyuchi, of samurai lineage. Oh, her father was so happy. At that time, her dad was the mayor of a small town in Japan of Oishi. But he was so happy. Now, Shigetoshi was America bound. He was an entrepreneur. And Takeko felt, well, she had some adventure in her too, just like that character, Saburo, and the boy who drew cats. So off they left Japan and went to the United States. And the first place they went to was the Grand Canyon. It was their honeymoon. And then her husband received a telegram. There's a job for you in Seattle. So off they went to Seattle and made it their home. And they raised 6 children. It was then Takeko went into the sitting room. And there was a low table called a tokonoma. And on it, ikebana, flower arrangement. In a very simple vase, 3 purple irises. Heaven, earth, man. And behind that was a brush painting in pink of a peony flower on a single stem. Then she walked over to the corner and picked up her shamisen, a classical Japanese string instrument with a long wooden neck attached to a resonating box covered in hide. There are 3 silk strings that attach from the top to the bottom. And she tightened the friction pegs to tune it, and she took the ivory bachi pick and she started to play. Sakura, Sakura. So many memories came into her mind, and she thought out loud to herself. My shamisen was one of the few belongings I could take to America, and one of the few things I could bring to the relocation camp, 1942. I will never, ever forget that day. February 19th, 1942, Executive Order 9066 was signed. 120,000 Americans of Japanese descent were incarcerated in camps around the United States. I remember my family, we all ended up at the Puyallup Fairgrounds. They call it the assembly camp, or they called it Camp Harmony. And we stayed there until the permanent camp in Idaho, Camp Minidoka, was ready. My 6 children, they were all affected by this war. Now, 4 of them were already adults. There was Ed and Art. They both joined the Army. Stella, she had a job in Washington, D.C., working for the federal government on all things the atomic bomb project. And Lillian, well, she married a graduate student who eventually joined the State Department. But the 2 youngest, Lucius and Marie, they were school-age children, so of course they had to come with us to Camp Minidoka in Idaho. Our whole family life was just so disrupted. Our traditional dinner time was non-existent, as the 2 kids, they would just take off and want to sit with their friends, school friends, for dinner, and they would scout which mess hall had the best food, and off they would go. Such was life at that time. We were there until the duration of the war, and when we were released, my husband, he just was not the same. He could not shake off that experience. 2 years passed and he had a stroke and he passed away. Now at this camp, we all had a mantra. It was, "Kodomo no tame ni." We do it for the children to show that we are loyal Americans. We are loyal. And also, gaman desu ne. You must bear up to it. So many things I would love to tell the grandchildren. Next time, besides telling them a folk tale, I am going to tell them my stories. Sakura, Sakura. Thank you. Well, I'm so happy with all the wonderful telling, Rupa, Eleanor. I mean, how great. And thanks to the Asian American Storytellers in Action for bringing the group together. I think we've been together now maybe 3.5 years. So now, before we break, have a 10-minute break, if you would like to share a story, please let me know, and then I'll check the chat to see if anybody out in Zoom land would like to share. We ask that the stories be about 8 minutes. And then after the end of story time, we have just a few announcements we'd like to share with you. So let's get up and stretch our legs.
Go.
Intro you, okay?
Make up something good.
Yeah, I will. Just a couple of announcements, and I just want to let you know that our June tellers are two very incredible storytellers, John Berthal from Squim and Maggie Lott from Olympia. So it should be a real treat. Also, there will be no meeting in July. We'll take a rest, but in August will be another South Sound Story Guild event. Stories in the Park, Stories in the Dark, August 10th, which is a Saturday, and we'll send out a newsletter about that. So now let's start with open mic. And the first teller is Randy.
I'm gonna not start my entrepreneur. So I'm not sure,
Back up.
I need to, okay, that's what I was, because
Is that okay, Greg?
A little bit more that way. Yeah, that's good.
okay. This is the first time I've taught at this with this setup. I've attended, of course, but in the past, I've been able to see myself, which I didn't really like doing while I was studying. So because of Mother's Day, I've kind of put together a selection, many little vignettes about mothers. I was thinking one day I realized really that if I stretched my arm really far that way, and this one really far that way, I realized that I had actually physically touched 7 generations in my family. So I'm going to tell you about it now. Oh, and this is all women, mothers and grandmothers and things like that. And things like that. So my great grandmother, Sigrid Moe, was born about 1870. And she emigrated to the United States about 1890. I didn't bother to go look up the exact dates. She came from Lone, Norway with her husband, and they settled in northern west Minnesota, where lots of other Norwegians were there, of course, many parts of Minnesota. She lived in the same town. It's called Ada, Minnesota now, for all the time that she lived, the rest of her life. And she lived until she was about 9. So in 1958, when I was 8 years old, my mom and dad and sister and I took a trip by train from Kennewick, Washington to Minneapolis. And we spent and this was at Christmas time, we spent a couple weeks in Minnesota visiting lots of different relatives, including my great grandmother, Sigrid Moe. I got to see her in person in 1958. She was still living in Ada, Minnesota, and her youngest son of 9, who was not young himself, but he had chosen to continue to live in Ada and to live with his mother and take care of his mom. She seemed really active to me when I was just 8. I thought it was really fun to meet her because she was hardly any taller than me. I don't think she even was 5 feet tall. And my sister and I thought it was so fun to meet her because we'd heard about her. She couldn't hear very well because she always liked to stand in front of the TV and talk to people because she didn't really react to that. And we only stayed there for part of the day to visit her. So one of the things that my sister and I thought was so funny, because we'd never been around people that were born somewhere else or knew other languages besides English, but living all those years in the same place in Minnesota where there were lots of other Norwegians, she'd never lost her Norwegian lilt, I'd call. So one time during that day when we were there, she offered to make coffee and tea and bring out cookies and things and toast. And she asked us, because when she made toast, she said, "You want yam and jelly with your toast?" And we thought, yeah. And she pointed, "Oh, jam, jelly." We thought that was so funny. Well, that was the one time that I actually met my great grandmother, Sigrid Monk, who emigrated from Norway. The next person I'll talk to you about is my mother's mother. Her name was Edith Jane Dowd King, and she was born in 1882 in Pueblo, Colorado. Soon after she was born, her family, her mom and dad and brother, traveled to Seattle because her father had been trained as a harness maker, and he thought that Seattle was getting to be a booming town, and he thought that he could open a shop there or something and would have a way to live. But they didn't stay in Seattle very long. They were there it would have been maybe 1885 or a couple of years later. That was before the gold rush, and Seattle was still a pretty rough town. It was not a place that good Methodists were going to live. Too much bad stuff. So then they moved to Idaho, and for a number of years worked for both the Methodist Mission and the Bureau of Indian Affairs at Fort Hall Indian Reservation. And they lived on the land there. Her father taught harness making and things like that to the natives because they were supposed to learn to farm, needed to know that kind of stuff. Despite all of the good and bad things that you can hear about the Indian reservations and things, my grandmother and her mother were well loved by the tribe or members of the tribe. In fact, my mother kept friendship going with Jeanette Pocatello, who was one of the last children born to Chief Pocatello. He was pretty old when that child was born. But they were friends clear until Jeanette died in the 50s. And my grandmother many times went to visit folks at Fort Hall. She would tell us stories about what she did when she was a child. She rode horses through the prairies just all day, gone all day with her friends and with her native friends. And she had a little tiny rose garden in this duplex that she lived in her last house that she lived in. And she raised roses there. This was still in Idaho. And she always wore a pair of deerskin gloves that had beading on the back. And those had been made by her friend Jeanette Pocatello. And she used those when she worked in the roses. They were getting worn and kind of crumpled, but I think, what a way to use a special treat that you had, something that you collected or whatever. She just used it for the practical things and took care of her roses then. A few years ago, I met the daughter of Jeanette Pocatello at Fort. That was really fun. Really fascinating to get some history from a different aspect. The next person I'm going to talk about is my mother. My mother, Bertha Jean King Moe, was born in 1923 in Burley, Idaho. She lived there her whole life. Well, not her whole life, but she grew up there and then went off to college and didn't live in Burley anymore. She was the last of 4 children, and there was 5 years apart between each of the kids. So by the time she was born, her oldest sibling was already like 15 years old. And all the kids once they graduated high school, they went to college. And then because of when it was, both of her sisters got married, and one was a brother. The brother went into the military, and one of the husbands also were in the military, because this was all happening just before World War II and during World War II. So there was like 5 years when she didn't have any other siblings living in her house, and her parents were kind of getting old because I'm not gonna try to calculate the age of that, but they were definitely 60 or more. And so she was get kind of bored, but of course she was at school. And she told me something about herself. I knew that from the whole time I lived with her, her whole life, you know, because I met her when I was brand new. She listened to jazz and big bands and rhythm and blues and all the Dixieland jazz and all the crooners and all of that stuff. We were raised on that music. She loved that music. And she told me when she was a teenager, she'd kind of go to bed early if she was bored with hanging out with her folks. And she'd listen to the radio and hear all this great music. And I thought, oh, that's so cool. It took me a number of years to realize she was not listening to somebody playing, what are those? I know records, but the ones before LPs. No,
45.
no.
78.
Yes. It wasn't somebody playing a 78 on the radio station in Idaho. No, she was listening to the bands playing live, all the way from Los Angeles, from Chicago. Here she is in a tiny town in southern Idaho, and even New York City. And I thought about my mother thinking that she might have been in one of those dance halls with the sparkly things and dancing to the music of Count Basie. I'll not remember any of their names right now, but all these famous band. Well, in her later years, when it was hard for her to sleep, and my dad snored a lot, she got a little Sony tape recorder and she cassette taped a lot of her favorite songs. There were all those same musicians. And then she'd put it under her pillow at bedtime and fall asleep with that. And that's what she did every night for years. Still my favorite music. All my favorite music. Well, the next person on the list is me. And I'm not going to tell you anything about me, except I was born in 1950. And yeah, that's it. Well, I'll say, I can't really tell stories about myself that way. Okay. As far as myself as a mother, when I was 34, is that right? 34, I adopted 2 girls. And we were living in Louisiana at the time, and these girls were adopted from social services. But they were mixed race. One daughter is still white, and the other is mixed race, black and white. In Louisiana, probably still now, but that's just my opinion, but for sure in the 1970s and 80s, nobody was going to adopt a pair of daughters that were not the same race. But we weren't planning to stay in Louisiana for very long. And so my husband and I got to adopt them. Maggie, who's the youngest, she never knew who her father was. There weren't, even when she was in touch with the birth family of her mother's side, her birth mother's side, never knew who those people were. But thanks to DNA, just this year, my daughter is 45 now. She connected with her birth family. Wow. Her birth father passed away maybe 20 years ago, but he had 4 kids, I think, but 2 of the boys who are in their 40s as well, just like she is, have been communicating with her. They talk on the phone all the time. And she told me, you know, Mom, I always kind of had a hole in my heart, I thought. And now I have brothers. It's so exciting. And it brought to mind a story that when we adopted Angel and Maggie, it was like at the end of the school year, and we didn't come back to, and we were living in Louisiana at the time. We didn't come back to Washington to visit our parents until Christmas that year. And my mother is a well-known locally genealogist, although she's been gone for 27 years. And she started telling the kids all about the family background, not their family background, but my family. And she showed pictures and she did all this kind of stuff. It was really cool. Excuse me, I don't know that the kids got much of it, but my mother was really into doing that. And so when we were going back that year, I mean, that Christmas time, went back, flew to Houston and drove into central Louisiana. Maggie, the little one, she said, Mommy, Grandma was telling us all the time about ancestors. Do we have Ann brothers too? And I thought, well, now in the year 2024, she's got some Ann brothers. So Maggie then, the year she was 19, she had a baby. But I knew she was going to have a baby. I was living in New Mexico. She was living in Houston. But I got a phone call one Friday evening after work that said, Mom, the baby's coming and you have to come now. I said, well, I have plans for a couple of weeks from now. No, you have to come now. I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? So I found the home phone of my boss. I called him. He said, sure, go ahead. I got a house sitter. I threw a bunch of stuff in a suitcase. People kept calling me. She'd call me. Her friends would call me. Her sisters-in-law would call me. Her own sister called, all this stuff. And I said, you got to stop talking to me because I got to pack and get to the airport. So that's what I did. 12 hours after her daughter, whose name is Heaven, 12 hours after her daughter was born, I was there. And it was wonderful. I stayed for a couple weeks, helped with a lot of getting all the baby things together. There's some very sweet pictures of me with the baby. Well, is there anything more than that story? I don't think so. Because that baby is now, well, now she's almost 26. But when she was 20, she had a baby. And her baby's name, oh, I know the part I forgot to tell about Meg. She told me all about the birth. She knew she was going to have a baby, so she had to take her two stepsons and take them to their aunt's house. And then she had to pack her bag because she wasn't packed yet because it was early. And then she had to drive herself to the hospital. And then she went into labor and talked to everybody on the phone while she was in labor. That's kind of like before cell phones, but she still does that all the time. And she said, and I never screamed once, Mom. And there she was, that cute little baby with the hair like Asian and Indian hair, but eventually it turned to beautiful curls. Okay, so then she had, that was Maggie having Heaven. When Heaven was 20, she had a daughter, and her name is Marley. So she's my great grandchild. Oh, and I was going to put the years in, but you know, you can figure some of that out just by what time it is now. And Marley is 5 years old now. All of those people I just named live in Olympia, so I see them sometimes way too much, but sometimes it's really, really well. So Mara was born in whatever, 5 years ago, 19 or 18, I forget. I think it was 18 because it's interesting that my daughter was born in 78, her daughter was born in 98, her daughter was born in 18. Well, Mara is a delight. She loves to paint. I thought of her so much when we were telling the story about the cats. And she just, there's a giant thing on our table next to the dining table. And she comes and sits down and just starts painting. So is that kind of all the thing? Oh, I don't know how long, of course, Mara's going to live. But I can sit there and think, you know, I actually know, and not just heard of, but actually touched all of these people born in 1870, Mara born in 2018, and you know, she's likely to live way past 2070. That's 7 generations and 200 years of family history that I actually have touched. And it's really cool. Wow. So thank you.
Thank you, Randy. Just to think, generations of women. I mean, that is something else. Oh, yeah, I guess so. Yeah. Oh,
my God, I didn't know
I want to invite John.
Oh.
Come on up here, John.
The answer to that question.
Thank you, Toby. I'd like everybody to close their eyes and just relax for a minute and think back to about 1951, when the big brown wash machine was in your basement or your grandmother's basement. It had a thing on top. They called it a wringer. It had two rollers. You put the wet clothes in and they'd come out like a board. Remember that? Huh? Well, everybody wake up. I was a mommy's boy, a real mommy's boy. Everywhere my mom went, I was right behind her. I was her helper. My favorite day, wash day. My mom would get this big round wooden basket and put all the dirty clothes in it and my two socks. Then she'd go out the back door, down some stairs and in another door. She called it the basement door. And there was our washer, kind of dirty white. It was sitting there. Had this thing on top, my mother called a wringer. She said I couldn't play with it because I would lose my arm in it, so I didn't. But when she put the water in there, and then she put all these clothes in there, and then she'd sprinkle some soap, I'd get a chair, put it over there, climb up, look over the top. I watched that thing go one way, then the other. I don't know why it didn't go all the way around, but it didn't. It just went one way or the other. Then all of a sudden that soap would come to my nose, go up my ears, and I'd have to sneeze a couple times. I got back off that chair, went around front, and I put my bottom butt right against it as it was moving. Now, I called it my bottom butt because my brother loved it. When he got mad at me, which he was always mad at me, he called me a butthead. So I had to make sure which butt was going to be rubbing against him. So there I was, and I curl up my and make fist, little fist, because I had little hands. So I go like this, and I can feel that thing. And then I start to sing. Let's do the wash machine, and I'll sing a song. Let's do the wash machine all day long. Yeah, yeah. Oh, I love that. I could do it all day long. Johnny, would you go over and play at your dad's workbench? Mom, I'm gonna put the sheets through the wringer. I don't want you around here. But Mom, I could do the wringer like the sewing machine. No, you go over there. So I went over to the workbench. I started going through the drawers. And there was just stupid tools, nothing to play with. Well, I climbed under the workbench. There was a black box about like that. And it had to have something important because I've never seen a black box. So I pulled it up. It was heavy. I set it down there. I started to pull that top. When out jumped this monster. It had orange eyes, big long teeth, and claws. It ran towards my mother. I took off after it. It was going like this. Oh, it was huge. I took off, but it was fast. I got to my mom. Mom, we got a monster. Let's get out of here. She was putting that sheet in. And she goes, oh, honey, that's just a mouse. It won't hurt you. Oh, God, Johnny, would you pull that cord out? Now, my mom was grunting. I don't know why. So I went over and I grabbed that black cord and I was grunting and I got it out. Johnny, run upstairs and get your sister. My arm is in the wringer. Oh my God, I looked up there. It was all the way up to her elbow. My mother lost her arm. I went out the basement, over up this back stairs into the kitchen. Blister, that was my sister. Blister, my wash machine's eating Mom up. There was no Blister. I went into the living room and there was Blister sitting in my dad's stuffy chair, reading a stupid book. Now, my sister was 3 years older than me. She was 8, but she wanted to be as smart as me. And so that's why she read, because my dad would look at me every once in a while and say, boy, he's a smart one. So I knew I was the smartest in the family. Golly. Mr. Business School. Mom's getting eaten up by the washing machine. Well, she ran by me like I was sitting in a sandbox. So I got up and knocked off the sand and ran behind her. We went down those stairs into the basement. Mom, what can I do? Blister says, pull a chair up. So she pulls it. Oh, climb up and hit the handle. I can't reach it. So Blister goes up there and she hits that top of the ringer. Nothing. Hit it harder. Blister puts it from her fists together, puts it above her head. Tears rolling down her eyes. I don't know why, because her arm was not in the ringer. But she hit that thing and there was a bang. And my mom pulled her arm. She put it down like this and she was saying something in foreign language, I don't know. But it was all red and it stunk like burnt liver. Now, my mother always burnt the liver when she cooked, so I knew the smell. Carly, run upstairs and get you and Johnny a jacket. We have to walk down to the hospital. Well, Blister ran upstairs, got me and her jacket, and we put them on, and we went out the basement, going down to another set of stairs and walked across Nelson Street. And we were headed down Star Hill, because that's where we lived, on Star Hill. We're the third highest house. And we're down there, and we get to the very bottom. Now, St. Anne's Hospital is run by Catholic, or this Catholic hospital run by nuns. So we walk across 2 blocks. We get to the hospital. I grab that door, open it up. It's like the biggest door I've ever seen. It went all the way to heaven. My mom and Blister walk inside, and I walk in, and I look over there, and there's a penguin sitting in a room with bars on the windows. Can I help you, Mrs. Berthel? Now, she wasn't smiling because she saw me. Yes, my mom told her what happened. Well, why don't you go into room 101 and Dr. Whitehead will be right with you. So we went into room 101, we're sitting there, all of a sudden the door opened. Well, Eileen, I hear you got yourself in the ringer. Well, let's take a look there, girl. I couldn't understand him when he talked. So he grabs my mother's arm and he starts poking it. And my mother's going, well, I got off my chair because I'm going to go over and kick him right in the leg. He's hurting my mother. He looked over at Blister and I said, you two knuckleheads, stay right here. I'm going to go over and get an x-ray of your mom's arm and see if maybe we can see if anything broke. So they left. Now I was sitting across from Blister and I said, hey, Blister, you know that mouse caused Mom to put her arm in the ringer? She was reading, of course. Uh-huh. You think that mouse is still there? I don't know, John. I think that mouse followed us down to the hospital. Oh, I think that mouse is in the room. I jumped out of my seat and went over to sat with her because I was going to protect her. Just then, Dr. Whitehead came in. Okay, there's nothing wrong with your mom's heart, but I'd like you to do the work for her. I don't want her to do any lifting. My mom's arm was wrapped in I think a sheet off somebody's bed in the hospital, wrapped up. Now, Eileen, I want to put this ointment on your arm every 6 hours. Okay. Well, we went home. About 3 days later, I was coming up the back stairs after playing outside all day, maybe an hour. And I heard the music. It was loud, And the closer I got to the back door, the louder it got. I opened it back and I walked in. And I looked in the living room. And there was my mother, Ludnut, and my sister, Blister. They were doing the washing machine. And I listened to the music. Come on, everybody, let's twist like we did last summer. Let's twist again, like we did last year. Do you remember when? Just then, my brain spoke to my head, and it said, somebody borrowed this, your words to let's do the wash machine. And somebody stole all your moves to the wash machine. Well, you know, Chubby Checker probably went on and got rich and famous. But I still have my story. Thank you, and little Johnny has left the basement.
Thanks, John. Those little Johnny adventures are fantastic. The twist, that is very good. Now I would love to invite Sandra to come and tell her story. Sandra's a member of our guild.
Thank you. My mother, Dr. Georgia Linnea Johnson, MS, PhD, MD, the letters never stop coming. She was a person who did not suffer fools. And there were so many fools to suffer. One day I asked her, Mom, who is the most foolish person in the world? And she said, I'm not sure, but I know who was the stupidest. I said, well, who was that? She said, well, a long time ago, I believe it was in England, because that has produced many a stupid person. There was a man who was a perfect, well-placed human being, but he always thought he was treated disrespectful and that he had bad luck. And one day he shook his fist at heaven and said, I'm going to go ask God why I am the most unlucky person in the world. So he set off, and for a year and a month and a week and a day, he walked until he came to a forest, and a group of wolves was running through the forest. And at the very tail end, there was a very skinny, very mangy, very unhealthy looking wolf who was just trying to keep up. And he couldn't. So he sat down and he looked at our traveler and said, where are you going? He said, I'm off to talk to God and ask God why I'm the most unlucky person in the world. And the wolf said, well, human, when you're there, could you ask God why I'm so skinny? Why I'm so unhealthy? Why I can't keep up with the pack? I will, said the man. And on he traveled for another year and a month and a week and a day until he arrived in yet another forest. And in the middle of the forest, amidst all these wonderful large trees, was a very thin tree. And as he watched, its leaves, all its leaves began to fall off, even though it wasn't the right time of year. And the tree, in a very thin, unhealthy voice, said, where are you going? Well, I'm going to go ask God why I'm the most unlucky man in the world. Could you ask God why I can't grow? All my brothers and sisters around me are so healthy and well-leaved, but look at me. Well, I'll ask, sure. And off he went. I don't know what he ate. I don't know what he drank. I don't know how his shoes held up, but he did for another year and a month and a week and a day travel on until he came to this lovely little house on the edge of another woods. And there in front of the cottage was a beautiful garden. And he went through the gate and he knocked on the door, and a woman came to the door and said, welcome, traveler. Would you like to come in and share a meal with me? That was a nice. So he went in and he sat down and he said, this is a lovely place. Yes, I inherited it. And it's well suited to me. But why are you traveling? Well, I'm going to ask God why I am the most unlucky man in the entire world. Well, could you ask God why, even though I live in such a beautiful setting and have all I need, I am so unhappy and lonely? Oh, sure, I'll ask. And so for yet another year and month and week and day, he traveled on. At last, he came to the Golden Gates. And there was St. Peter stroking his long beard and said, why have you come? You've not even done. I come to ask God why I'm the most unlucky man in the world. And this booming voice filled the air and said, it's because you're stupid. Well, that's a little bit rude. I'm the unluckiest man in the world. And I want to know why. And God said, I told you, you have all you need and you don't avail yourself of those wonderful things around you. Sheesh, all this walking for that. And he turned around and he headed back. And after a long time, which was, as you know, a good long time, he got to the lovely cottage and he knocked on the door. The woman welcomed him in. She just baked a pie. It was lovely. And they had a grand meal together. And he said, well, yes, I got my answer from God, but I'm not really to reveal it. It's just for me. And did you ask him about me? Oh, yes, I did. I did ask about you. And it was actually St. Peter who told me as I was leaving the Golden Gates. And he said, you just need to find a husband. She said, well, I live here in such isolation. Would you like to be my husband? He said, I'm sorry. I'm on a travel. I've got to go and look for my opportunities. So he headed off. And for another long time, he walked until at last he came to that woods where there was the very fragile tree. And the tree asked him if he talked to God. And he said, yes, I have. I can tell you part of it. I need to look for opportunities. But I've found the answer to you. It turns out that long, long ago, when you were nothing more than an acorn, some pirates came into this woods and buried a treasure, which you then have been growing on top of, and your roots cannot make it past the big treasure box down below. And the tree said, oh, I think some woodsman left a spade leaning against the tree over there. Could you maybe dig her out the treasure? He said, no, I'm sorry. I'm on a journey. I've got to look for my opportunities. And so he left. And he walked on, and finally, after a long time, he got to the first forest, and it began to pour with rain. So he looked around and he saw a cave, and he went into the cave, and lying there, curled up, was a wolf, the same wolf, on the edge of death. And he talked to the wolf, and he said, yeah, I found out what your trouble is. You're starving, and you should really eat something. And so the wolf did. And that's what happens when you're a stupid person.
Oh, Sandra, thank you so much. Fools and answers they get. Well, Brett, we we could squeeze you in. Okay. And Brett, what kind of stories are you gonna tell us tonight?
Well, I'm continuing my quest for finding stories about the wide schools.
Okay,
So I have two new groups, or a group and a person.
okay. Satu boleh.
Satu cukup.
Satu
Only
cukup.
one, she said. Okay, well, how many people know what a Cajun is? Okay, good. A Cajun is a descendant of people, they usually live around Louisiana. They have a distinctive language that's based on ancient French. They have a great style of cooking. They're supposed to be good in the woods. Well, the reason they're called Cajuns is that in 1840s, the British wanted to eliminate all of the French-speaking settlers that were living in Nova Scotia. So they transported them from Nova Scotia to the nearest French area, which was Louisiana. So these people were ethnically cleansed. They were jerked from their homes, and they were brought down south to Louisiana, which was then part of France. And so they've flourished there. They've got their own culture. They've got their own food. They've got their own music, which is called Zydeco, and famous for their spicy stews. Well, this story is about, there's two of them. There's like, Sven and Ole in Norway. Well, these are Bodereau and Thibodeau. But the story I have tonight is just about Bodereau. Bodereau, which comes from the French word that means farmer. He was a very kind of taciturn guy, didn't say much. So one day he is at home and there's a knock on the door. And he goes to open up, and it's the Avon lady. So the Avon lady says, "Excuse me, is your wife at home?" And Bodereau says, oh no, she's not here now. And she says, well, being a good salesperson, says, "Would you mind if I come in and wait for her?" And Bodereau says, "Why not?" And he escorts her into the kitchen and has her sit there. So she sits there, and Bodereau goes about his life, his business. And after about 3 hours, the Avon lady is, she wants to move on. And so she says to Bodereau, "Well, when is she going to be home? Where is she?" And Bodereau says, "Oh, she went to the cemetery." And the Avon lady says, "Oh, when will she be back?" And Bodereau says, "Oh, I don't know. She's been there 11 years. That's a little,
A small one.
this is an easy one. In America, we have our own person who contributed greatly to sayings that mean more or less than what they really do. And he was a famous person, born Lorenzo Pietro Berra. He became world famous as a baseball player, coached the Yankees, coached the Mets. He got the name Yogi because he was always making these pronouncements. He would say things like, "It's like deja vu all over again." Or, "It ain't over till it's over." That's his famous one. He did not say, "It ain't over till the fat lady sings." He was attributed that, and he says, "I didn't say all the things I've said," in response to that. My favorite one is, "You better cut the pizza in 4 pieces because I'm not hungry enough to eat 6 pieces." Never answer an anonymous letter. If you come to a fork in the road, you should take it. No one goes to that restaurant these days. It's too crowded. And you can observe a lot by watching. Yogi Berra, thank you.
Oh, yes, we have a guest here, Nancy, who would like to share a poem with us.
I learned this poem when I was in 6th grade.
Okay.
And
Now,
That's
You're
good.
good.
okay. It's about the old maid and the burglar. Once there was a burglar bold who broke into a house. He opened the window and crept inside, as silent as a mouse. He hoped to make a haul. He hoped to make something. But if he'd known was the old maid's house, he hoped to make some swag. He hoped to make a haul. If he'd known was the old maid's house, he wouldn't have had all that gall. At 9, the skinny old maid came in. "Oh, I'm so tired," she said. And thinking things were quite all right, she didn't look under the bed. She took out her teeth and her big glass eye and the hair from off of her head. The burglar had 1,000 fits as he watched from under the bed. From under the bed, the burglar crept. He was a total wreck. But the old maid wasn't asleep at all, and she grabbed him by the neck. She didn't scream or holler. She was as calm as a clam, and all she said was, "Saints be praised, at last I found a man." From under her pillow, a pistol she took, and to the burglar said, "Young man, if you don't marry me, I'll blow off the top of your head." The burglar was too scared to run. He was too scared to scoot. He took one look at that big glass eye and said, "For pity's sake, shoot."
Thanks a lot, Nancy. And thank you everyone for joining us at the Harbor House and on Zoom. Now, just before we take off, Brett, did you want to say something about membership?
Oh, yes, if you haven't paid your dues, please pay it, $15 an individual, $20 for a family. We need to pay the rent for this place, so we do have some expenses, not money. So if you go to our website, you can pay it with PayPal, or you can just send me a check. It's better a check than cash, because I can't be trusted with cash.
Okay, is that, thanks, Brett. And we always have a little donation box too, because it does help pay for the rent of the Harbor House. So folks, we'll see you next month, June 12th. John Berthal and Maggie Locke will be the tellers. So see you then.